Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into something pretty interesting today. We're looking at Hindu deities, but through a family tree. It's going to reveal some interesting stuff about how male and female energies are shown.
Yeah, it's called a sort of plausible Hindu god family tree, and right away you see something interesting. There are way more male gods than goddesses, 35 male gods, and only 16 goddesses to be exact.
Whoa, that's like, what, more than twice as many?
Almost 2.2 to 1. So that's what we're going to try to figure out. Does having more male gods mean that they're seen as more important or more powerful?
It's a big question.
Data on the screen, numbers come alive. Male, female flows where the patterns thrive. Visual charts, public colors unify. Gender decoded, bringing truth to light. Small drum fill. We break it down, real talk. Trends unveiling, facts from every block. Here's your insight, watch the data glide. Gender decoded, let the beats collide.
One of the first things you notice is pretty striking. There are 35 male gods
Wow.
and only 16 female goddesses. That's like almost a 2 to 1 ratio.
Yeah.
So of course that got me thinking, is this a sign of like a patriarchal bias in Hindu mythology?
That's a really great question, and it's one that has been debated, back and forth for a really long time, and I think it's really easy to look at it and just, based on those numbers, come to that conclusion.
Yeah.
But I think before we make any judgments about that, we have to look a little bit deeper.
Okay, so what are we missing here?
Well, you have to consider the concept of Shakti, which is absolutely central to, Hindu belief. And it's this dynamic feminine energy, and it's a life force that fuels creation, preservation, and even destruction. And it's not just, in addition to things, it's essential for even the most powerful male gods to actually function.
So it sounds like it's not just about like the number of male gods versus female goddesses, but how their power and influence are understood within the context of Shakti.
Exactly. And a really great way to see this is by looking at some of the more well-known pairs that you see on the family tree. Like you have Brahma, the creator god, and he's paired with Saraswati, who embodies knowledge and wisdom. Then you have Vishnu, the preserver, and he's paired up with Lakshmi, the goddess of prosperity. And of course, everyone knows the famous duo Shiva, the destroyer god, and Parvati, who represents strength, power, and ultimately transformation.
It really does seem like those pairings highlight how the male and female energies are meant to be complementary and not in competition with one another.
Yeah, absolutely. They're often depicted as being totally interdependent. It's like two sides of the same coin. You need both to make it work.
Right. Now, there's something else on this family tree that really jumped out at me. There's this one goddess, Devi, and she's all alone at the very, very top. She's even above what's called the Trimurti,
Right.
which refers to Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. So what's the significance of her being in that position?
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Her placement there is not an accident. Devi is considered to be the ultimate expression of Shakti, the supreme feminine principle. And in some ways, she is the source of all creation, the wellspring from which every other thing flows.
Wow.
So even though on this family tree we see more male gods, Devi's placement there suggests that, theologically speaking, at least the feminine is recognized as the ultimate source.
Hold on. I need to process this for a second.
Yeah.
So we have what looks like male dominance just by looking at the numbers, but then we have this idea of Shakti and Devi's placement at the top.
Yeah.
This is already more complicated than I thought it would be.
And honestly, we are just barely scratching the surface.
Oh, boy.
So this is just one representation based on specific texts that are called the Puranas. And the Puranas are these ancient Hindu scriptures. And there's so much more to discover about gender dynamics within the vastness of Hindu mythology.
Okay. All right. I'm ready for more.
Awesome.
So I'm starting to understand how just looking at the numbers doesn't tell the whole story. But what about those famous images of Shiva and Parvati as like a single androgynous being?
Yeah, you're talking about Ardhanarishvara, right?
Right.
It's a really powerful image. Half of the figure is male representing Shiva, and the other half is female representing Parvati, and they're like seamlessly blended together.
Yeah. It really drives home that point that you can't have one without the other.
Right. It's a really visual representation of the masculine and feminine principles being fundamentally interconnected. Like they're not opposing forces. They're
Right.
working together in harmony for creation, preservation, and even destruction.
That, you know, I think it's super interesting how Hinduism portrays these powerful goddesses, especially figures like Durga and Kali.
Yeah,
These are not your, typical gentle and demure female figures.
I know. And the family tree actually describes them as embodying the fierce and protective aspects of Shakti. Durga is often shown riding a lion and, armed to the teeth, ready to take down any demon that threatens, the cosmic order.
Right.
And then you have Kali, who is often depicted adorned with skulls and severed limbs, embodying this power of time and the inevitability of transformation.
That's what I find so captivating about them. They really challenge that stereotype of feminine energy being just like nurturing or passive.
Yeah.
They really showcase the raw power of Shakti and demonstrate that feminine energy really encompasses creation, protection, and destruction.
Absolutely. And it really shows another fascinating thing about Shakti. It's multifaceted nature. We've talked about how it manifests in figures like Saraswati, the goddess of knowledge, and Lakshmi, the goddess of prosperity. But then you have Kali representing that destructive and transformative side. So it shows that, Shakti is this force that really can't be easily categorized.
So it's not just about acknowledging the feminine energy, but also understanding its complexity and all these different ways that it can manifest.
Exactly. And, it's important to remember that, like a lot of religions, Hinduism isn't a monolith. There are so many different traditions and schools of thought, each with their own unique interpretations of these things.
Oh, I see.
So, for example, Shakti traditions really focus on the divine mother. Goddesses like Durga and Kali aren't just, the partners of the male gods. They're the primary focus of worship.
Wow.
So really the understanding of Shakti and the roles of these goddesses can change depending on which branch of Hinduism you are looking at.
That makes sense. So the family tree is a helpful place to start, but it doesn't tell the whole story.
Yeah, exactly. Even within these branches, there's tons of different beliefs and practices. So that's why this family tree, while it's a good place to start, doesn't capture, all the richness and diversity of Hindu thought.
Yeah, it really seems like every time we peel back another layer, there's more complexity there.
Right.
Which brings me to something I've been thinking about. We've been discussing these gods and goddesses and these cosmic energies and these stories that feel larger than life. But how does any of this relate to us, here in the everyday world?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? How do we bridge that gap between these, really ancient myths and our modern lives?
Yeah.
And I think one way to look at it is to think about how these stories both reflect and maybe even shape the cultural and societal views of gender roles.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So, like, for example, if you believe, as some Hindus do, that the ultimate source of creation is feminine, like we see with Devi, how might that influence your perception of women's power in the world?
Yeah.
Or think about how this constant interplay between the gods and goddesses might impact how you understand how men and women interact and relate to one another in society.
I'm realizing now that this isn't really about reaching, definitive conclusions about things.
Yeah.
But more about opening up new perspectives.
Yeah, I totally agree. We're using these ancient myths as a way to look at, really complex concepts like gender and power. And it really encourages us to challenge assumptions and think critically about the stories that we tell ourselves and about the world around us.
Yeah. I'm realizing that the way each of us interprets these myths is going to be really personal.
Yeah.
We all come to the table with our own experiences and perspectives.
Right. And that's the best part. There's no one right way to understand these stories. What resonates with one person might not resonate with another person, and that's fine. It's an invitation to explore and to question and to find meaning in what speaks to you.
Right. As we've been talking about all this, I can't help but notice just how many different gods and goddesses we've mentioned.
Yeah.
And each one has such distinct qualities and energies.
It's like this huge tapestry of all these personalities and archetypes, right? Like you have Durga's, fierce protectiveness.
Right.
And then Saraswati's creative energy and Ganesha's wisdom.
Yeah.
And Kali's destructive power. It's almost overwhelming.
It really is. So do you think that there's value in us reflecting on which of these deities resonate most with us?
Yeah.
Like personally?
I think that's a really great idea. It's like holding up a mirror to our own psyches. So which of the deities speak to you? What about their stories and their qualities and their powers draws you to them?
Well, for me, I've always been fascinated by Saraswati. Maybe it's because I'm a writer.
Uh-huh.
But the idea of a goddess who embodies knowledge and creativity and the power of words,
Yeah.
it's just captivating.
That's beautiful. And it really speaks to the idea that these aren't just, ancient myths. They can serve as guides for us,
Right.
Sources of inspiration for our lives. So what aspects of Saraswati's energy, might you want to cultivate more fully in your own life?
Well, I think it's that sense of curiosity,
Mm-hmm.
that constant thirst for knowledge and for understanding.
Yeah.
And maybe even that courage to express myself creatively and,
Yeah.
find my own voice. What about you? Which deity resonates most strongly with you?
I think I've always had a soft spot for Ganesha.
Oh, yeah.
He's often depicted as the remover of obstacles.
Right.
And I just love that imagery. It reminds me that even when, I'm faced with some sort of challenge, there's always a way forward. It's about finding that creative solution in that path, through the difficulty.
I like that. It's like, these stories, they offer us real practical wisdom and not just, these abstract concepts.
Absolutely.
They can actually help us to navigate the ups and downs of our own lives.
Exactly. And that's what makes exploring mythology so rewarding.
Yeah.
It's not just about learning, facts and figures and things like that. It's about finding meaning and inspiration and even guidance, for our own personal journeys.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with this thought.
Yep.
Take a moment and just think about, the gods and goddesses that resonated with you. Which aspects of their character do you admire? And what qualities do they embody that you might want to cultivate more in your own life?
And remember, this exploration doesn't have to end here.
Right.
Hindu mythology is so vast,
Yeah.
and it's multifaceted. There's so many stories and deities and philosophical concepts that, are out there waiting to be discovered.
So keep exploring and keep questioning and keep that sense of wonder alive. Until next time.